Jean Grey is often deemed as one of the most powerful heroes and even sometimes most powerful even of the abstract entities in the Marvel Universe. But why exactly is that? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. Today we'll be attempting to answer that question somewhat as we dive deep into Jean's power set and many things you may have not even known that she was capable of. What do you think is the best power set in all of the Marvel Universe? Let us know in the comments below. Number 10. Control over life and death. Obviously, as the Phoenix or even the Dark Phoenix, Jean has been shown to have this ability. But did you know that this power actually first manifested when Jean's powers did, really going on to showcase the potential of her future abilities. When Jean's best friend Annie died when she was little after being tragically hit by a car, the traumatic experience caused Jean's powers to manifest. She reached out and created a psychic link between her and her friend, and despite being very new to these abilities, Jean was actually able to hold her friend's mind there, keeping her alive and trying to protect her from the encroaching darkness. Unfortunately, she was not strong or skilled enough just yet to do so for more than a few moments, and ultimately could not bring her friend back to life as Annie's injuries were simply too great. Eventually, Annie's mind disappeared, dying while their minds were linked, leaving Jean alone in the darkness. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when I get to talk about Jean Grey, I know I do, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. And if you are, thank you. Number 9. A God's Mind. Sure, the progenitor at this point is not your standard celestial. It was actually created by the Eternals and the Avengers, chiefly with major help from the mutant Mr. Sinister and the main Avenger Tony Stark. The progenitor was revived and reprogrammed, given new morals that were dictated by Earth's heroes in the hopes that it would help the Eternals in ending the war between Druig, who was then ruler of the Eternals, Eternal Prime if you will, and the mutants, who he had classified as deviants. However, this plan backfired when the Celestial decided to blame the inhabitants of Earth for the state of the planet, and put the entire populace basically on trial. In an attempt to save the world, Jean and a covert team infiltrated the progenitor, moving around inside it in the hopes of reaching its kill switch, so they could basically turn it off. Without Jean though, they never would have even made it very far. At the end, Jean was also crucial to the team's efforts, holding psychic damage that would have easily crushed them at bay and breaking into the Celestial's mind. No small feat considering Celestials are giant cosmic gods. And yes, I know this one was one that was still made by the people of Earth sort of, but still, the wiring's all still there, you know what I mean? Number 8. Telepathy. While this one might seem obvious to most readers in the present day, it's important to note that Jean's powerful telepathic skills were actually for many years a secret to both readers and actually to Jean herself. Initially, when we're introduced to Jean in X-Men issue number 1, it is her telekinetic abilities that are put on display. She picks up a book and flips through it. And I gotta admit, initially Jean's powers actually seem like the best of the bunch, with the most potential in terms of power levels. And yes, I know this is not how Jean's powers would be depicted, but I'm just saying in that first issue when I was introduced to Jean, I thought she was super cool. However, this feeling of her being super powerful that I had would be very short-lived, as Jean would be shown to struggle with even lifting her own weight telekinetically. In fact, at one point, I think it's even mentioned that Jean's own physical weight is her max limit for what she can lift with her mind. Apparently, what one can lift with one's own body is weirdly relevant, or used to be anyways, when it came to what a superhero could lift with their mind. Jean's like, I can't lift that much. They were like, you can't lift that much with your mind either, girl. Evidently, we didn't want to let Jean be too powerful. Otherwise, who would act as the team's damsel in distress? Which was the role Jean quickly became relegated to filling, honestly. However, later on, not only would her telekinetic powers become stronger as a result of both training and her bond to the Phoenix Force, but we'd also learn that this wasn't even Jean's major ability. No. As a psionic, Jean actually became known for being more powerful as a telepath, an ability that was hidden away from her for most of her life in an attempt to protect her from her own inexperience and her power's instability, thanks to mental blocks that were put in place by, you guessed it, Charles Xavier, who first met Jean when she was very young and her powers had just begun to manifest. Charles, of course, would eventually remove these blocks later in Jean's life when he felt that Jean was better equipped to handle these extraordinarily extraordinarily powerful abilities. And maybe when he was like, you know what, I should probably, the cat's out of the bag, I gotta let people know Jean's actually super OP. I think he didn't want Jean to harsh his mellow, to be honest. Number 7, empathy. One of the most overlooked powers that I think Jean and some others possess is the power of empathy. Empathy basically means that you feel what others feel. When someone says to you, I empathize, it's different than saying I sympathize, because they aren't just, imagining what you're going through and trying to understand it. They actually feel what you feel, likely having shared an experience with you or an emotional response at the very least. In comic book terms, being empathic, it doesn't usually just mean feeling what others feel. It can also mean controlling others' emotions, or using the emotions of people around you to make other people feel differently. A power that Jean has demonstrated before, like when she used her empathic skills to defeat Xavier's evil twin, Cassandra Nova. And she's actually used this ability to defeat a lot of people, I'm gonna be honest. But I don't think people think about the empathy, and it's pretty crazy, man. Number 6, finding the weakness. I mean, as a telepath, of course Jean can scan your mind and take with her any information that she finds. And this, of course, includes, you guessed it, any weaknesses that you have. Especially if you fall into the trap of thinking about said weaknesses while Jean is in your mind. If you have a nut allergy, watch out if Jean Grey's around you if you're fighting her. But even if you don't think about your weaknesses, Jean could probably easily find this out. That is exactly what she managed to do, although it wasn't quite as easy to know when she got inside his head. And you'd think telepathically he'd be pretty gifted himself, being the creator and leader of a hive mind as the Clintar and symbiote King in Black. But even Null could not resist Jean's power. Although she did have to try really hard, admittedly. Number 5, overcoming mental blocks. This is most likely a case of writers just forgetting the focus of Jean's psionic powers in the earlier days, but it happened in continuity. So that also means we can kind of count their possible mistake as actually a major strength for Jean. And if another writer wanted to reflect back on this moment, they could easily use it to bolster Jean's power levels, even back in the day when she was notably written to be a lot weaker. Remember how I said that Professor X created mental blocks for Jean when it came to her telepathy, which he later removed when he felt she was ready to handle her own off-the-charts power levels? Well, apparently early on, Jean did still display some telepathic abilities, even somehow with those blocks supposedly in place. She read Professor X's mind in an issue of Captain America, sensing that something was wrong by reading his thoughts. She literally says, like, she read his mind, basically. If this is true and it's considered canon, it would mean that Jean temporarily pushed through Xavier's mental blocks to read his mind, which, gotta be honest, that's like on a whole other level of power, I think. So if we want to count it as canon, there you go. Number 4, interstellar travel. When it comes to those with psionic abilities, we don't typically think of them as cosmic heroes who can fly through space and fight aliens, but guess what? Jean can. While bonded with the Phoenix Force, Jean has been shown to be capable of interstellar travel, propelling herself through space. The vacuum of space, she can just fly right through it and she feels fine, doesn't even need a spacesuit. She has also been shown to be able to fly and make it appear as though others are flying on Earth by using her telekinesis, but that one you probably already knew about. The interstellar travel though, that might have caught you unawares. Number 3, communicating undetected. Another great power as a telepath that Jean manages to have is keeping her telepathic conversations secret, which, when there's a lot of other telepaths around you, is not easy. Basically, there are many other powerful telepaths around you who could be trying to pry and eavesdrop on you, and a lot of them are also powerful. But Jean has managed to keep more than a few mental conversations a secret, even from some of the other most powerful telepaths in the universe, including Null, the god of symbiotes. While Null himself was in the middle of a telepathic conversation with Dylan, Jean actually managed to use her powers to slip into said conversation completely unnoticed, with Null not even aware that Jean was also talking to Dylan telepathically at the same time, and that Dylan wasn't really listening to him so much as he was listening to Jean. Honestly kinda rude, but also, yeah, Jean's trying to tell Dylan how to save the day, so fair enough. Number 2, control over nightmares. I don't know what's more frightening, the fact that Jean can basically manipulate people's dreams and nightmares through the villain Nightmare, or the threat she gave Nightmare after defeating him, where she basically said if she had to deal with him again, she was gonna destroy him at an atomic level. She's like, look, I don't like to end people's lives, but if you mess with me again, I will destroy you at an atomic level. Either way you slice it though, when it comes to Nightmare nightmares that have been created by the god of nightmares himself, Nightmare, Jean is the one who would really call the shots between them when they're pitted against one another. I've seen them run into each other a few times, and it does not end well for Nightmare. Number 1. The Phoenix Force. This is less of a power and more of a really interesting fact about a power. So for those of you that heard me say that title and go, well, obviously we know that, Amanda. Yes, yeah, I know. But I actually didn't know this fact myself initially, and I was surprised by it somewhat, so I figured I'd share it with you. We all know that Jean is one of the preferred hosts, if not, I would say, the preferred host for the Phoenix Force. But did you know that the all-powerful cosmic entity was actually holding Jean back? That's right. Jean has stated before that she actually became aware after the Phoenix Force left her that it was causing her to hold back her abilities and her power for fear of the Phoenix taking hold over her, because then she wouldn't have control. So while many like to say that Jean has only ever been extremely powerful when she's merged with the Phoenix, it turns out it's probably just the opposite. So yeah, Jean destroying like a whole world, apparently that's Jean holding back. Which honestly, to me, I gotta say, that all kind of makes sense. Saying Jean isn't actually powerful and that it's all the Phoenix has always felt like a cop-out to me, considering it's her own power and her own empathy that the Phoenix was seemingly attracted to in the first place. So you would think that would mean that she's at least on the same power level as the Phoenix, if not more powerful, and that's why it was like, yeah, I want you as the host, cause you got the power. That's about it. I'll see you next time, but until then, you stay nerdy, YouTube. Bye!